It's not as long as it looks. I wanted to do a bio of Peter Dwyer. And I have known Peter for close to 20 years. Pretty well the last 15. But what I knew before that was kind of a little bit here and there. So I joined with one of his brothers. So there goes. This is a mixture of Jim Dwyer and what I came up with. So the title of this bio is Jim's title, an abridged version of an unabridged life. A boy named after the first pope ever, and also a monk of St. John's Abbey, has a head start on leading with vision and perspective. Tenacity may have been genetic, or it may have been learned while growing up in a family with 5 boisterous brothers and 1 little sister in central Minnesota. It gets very cold up there in the winter, and there's a lot of time you have to play inside for months. So I think that's part of how people grow up in central Minnesota. A little later on, as captain of his St. John's Prep School wrestling team, Peter proved that wanting to win was as important as the weight one had when wrestling heavyweight. Peter's combination of vision for possibilities, looking from different angles, and grit for going forward has been the basis of 3 successful publishing paths in his career. In the early 70s, Peter personally published The Insider, a magazine, a rock and roll magazine newspaper that came out every month in the Twin Cities. It was the only or the main source of information of rock and roll in the early 70s. And for those of us of a certain age, the early 70s was everything. Later on in those 70s, he was recruited to New York to manage nationally distributed specialty magazines, a family-owned company. And there he was, from Manhattan to trade shows around the USA. He took on the publishing role from many aspects. Then, in 1989, Peter was recruited to come back to central Minnesota. He was hired by the St. John's Abbey to handle the operations of liturgical press. Needless to say, after many years in New York, Minneapolis, New Jersey, coming back to Minnesota as an adult and with a family, there were many changes besides the job, I'm sure. But Peter had one thing going for him. It was very familiar territory. He grew up in the warehouse of liturgical press because his father John was the manager of the liturgical press for 36 years. De facto, without the title, he ran liturgical press, I think, most of those years. Peter's dad did. When Peter came, there were significant changes going on in publishing. It's nothing new, folks. And also within the church. And that obviously, as we know, better than most, affects parish products, publishing in general. Leadership was dearly required in a volatile market. Now this is Jim's story. I never heard this one before, but Jim claims that at this time, in 1989, some of the younger monks of the Abbey posited that they could sell the company and make more money on the stock market.
It wasn't one of the younger monks, it was one of the older monks.
Even better. That didn't happen. as you know. The mission of communicating what it means to be a Catholic Christian of the Roman Rite is a centuries-old goal and charge of St. John's Abbey. And within a few years after Peter's arrival, not only did they not sell the company, they bought Pueblo Publishing Company out of New York, and then the year after, Lit Press acquired Michael Glacier Books. And again, those of us who went to school in the 80s and 90s, Michael Glacier Books was everything. Not long after that, we're getting closer to home here, don't worry. In partnership with his wife Rose and our very own Bob Burns, the RBTE came into existence. Remember that? It's not that long ago.
1991.
Pardon?
1991.
Yep, that's exactly right. So RBTE was the Religious Booksellers Trade Exhibit, and it met every year in St. Charles, just a few miles west of here. And it came to be, within a short few years, a meeting that brought together booksellers from all over the United States, as well as a lot of Catholic publishers from all over the English-speaking world. It became a mini Frankfurt for English-speaking Catholic publishers for a good 20 years, or close to, yeah, actually more than 20 years. Not only that, in the 90s, Peter was also busy with other things besides running a publishing house. He became very active in the CBPA. Some of you remember what that stands for. What was it now? Catholic Book Association, yeah, that's right. And Peter was served as president of CBPA in the mid-90s, was it? And again, when ACP was formed out of the CBPA, Peter just recently completed another term as president of ACP. In 1998, we are not out of the 90s yet, but we are getting close. I promise. The director of the liturgical press, Father Michael Norton, retired, and Peter was hired to become the publisher and the director of the press. He was the first non-monastic leader of the then more than 70-year-old company. And so since 1998, with a wide variety of products for a richly diverse church. That was one of our logo terms at one point. But I mention it here because it is still a very fundamental Catholic principle. Our church is richly diverse. That's what Catholic means. And I think our very presence here expresses that same reality. Peter helped lead that for the liturgical press, for the CBPA, the RBTE, and in many other ways, big and small. In terms of product, one of the biggest achievements I think that Peter is pleased to look back on is the creation and the success of Give Us This Day that launched 11 years ago. Has really been a real tribute to the press, the well-being of the press, but also the vision of what it means to be a Catholic publisher in the 21st century. We have to remember who we are and think smartly about that and how can we be who we are in new and varied ways. So all in all, Peter secured the liturgical press to remain a leading presence in Catholic publishing and as an integral apostolate within the life and mission of St. John's Abbey itself, helping the monastery keep its promises to keep spreading the word. And so would you please join with me and my colleagues in thanking Peter for his vision, perspective, and tenacity. They have not only persevered in him, they have borne rich fruit. Thank you, Peter.
very much. I couldn't fit it all on a couple of sheets of paper, so the teleprompter's running at the back. When my wife and I were living in New Jersey, considering your offer to come back to Minnesota and work at the press, we had two concerns. Lots of concerns, but two that really ended up on the table. She was only concerned about the first one. And the first one was, can you go home again? So where you grew up, what you knew, would that feel odd? The second one, my main concern, would Catholic publishing have a sense of humor? Because I couldn't see myself spending a year or many years in a quiet, pious, a humorless kind of place. And we decided that we would take a chance on both those things. And it worked out spectacularly for me and for us. And my first hint of the sense of humor was the first year I was there, started in January that spring, came here to Chicago to set up the NCEA exhibit with Ed Bessel. There's probably 3 people in the room who remember Ed Bessel. A crazy man, we'll go to another time. And we're unpacking the skids, getting the booth put together, and 2 guys wander over, and pretty soon a third. And the first 2 to wander over are Charlie Jones from Ave Maria, and Pat McGurry, who is a sales rep who was a character. Another story. They came over to see what this son of John Dwyer would be like. And within a minute, the laughs were rolling. You couldn't be around those 2 and not be laughing, unless you were drinking. And the third person to wander over was Bob Burns. And I knew before that day was finished that this was an industry that welcomed people. This was a profession that welcomed people and supported them. And that's been an essential part of my longevity. Besides humor, it was important, of course, that it be intelligent, creative, gospel-centered, productive in a way that means something. And it's been all of those things. And it's been especially important to have the support and the collaboration of all of you and all of those who came before you and all those who have come after you. Yes, we compete. I want to talk to you about some of those awards. Yes, we compete, but there's no reason that we can't collaborate and support one another. And that's been life-giving to me all through my 33 years at the press.